A journey into the nature of mind. Picture a world where science meets philosophy to tackle questions about the human mind, free will, and the essence of being. This is the realm of Daniel C. Dennett, a thinker who invites us to rethink how we understand ourselves and the universe. From his groundbreaking theories of consciousness to his insights on cultural evolution, Dennett's ideas offer profound life lessons that blend rigorous logic with a deep appreciation for the complexity of life. Dennett's journey is one of curiosity and innovation, bridging fields and challenging dogmas. Through his work, he has redefined concepts like free will and consciousness, giving us tools to navigate not only intellectual puzzles but also everyday challenges. This exploration delves into 5 transformative lessons drawn from Dennett's philosophy, inviting us to apply his insights to enrich our lives. 1. The power of the intentional stance, a tool for understanding and empathy. The intentional stance is one of Daniel Dennett's most influential ideas. It refers to the method of interpreting and predicting the behavior of an entity, whether human, animal, or machine, by attributing beliefs, desires, and intentions to it. Instead of viewing behavior as a mechanical or random process, the intentional stance encourages us to look at it as if the entity has goals, motivations, and reasoning behind its actions. Dennett's approach takes inspiration from the way we naturally understand others. For instance, when observing a friend decide to go to the store, we don't just see a person moving from one location to another, we think of it as a goal-driven action. The friend is likely going to the store because they want to buy something. This attribution of mental states is the core of the intentional stance. We ascribe intentions not because we can directly observe the internal workings of another mind, but because doing so allows us to predict and make sense of behavior in a practical way. In Dennett's framework, the intentional stance operates at various levels. Human beings, when we observe another person, we often interpret their actions through a lens of motivations. This perspective helps us navigate social interactions and resolve misunderstandings. For example, if a colleague is acting frustrated, attributing the frustration to a belief that their work is being overlooked allows us to understand their behavior more clearly. Animals, we can apply the intentional stance to understand animal behavior as well. For instance, a dog may appear to wag its tail in response to seeing its owner. By attributing a desire for affection or attention to the dog, we anticipate the dog's actions and provide an appropriate response. Machines and artificial intelligence. Dennett also applies the intentional stance to machines, especially artificial intelligence systems. If a robot performs a task, such as sorting packages based on size, we may assume it has goals like picking up large packages or placing items in the correct bin, even though it operates entirely through programmed algorithms. How Dennett's stance transforms our interactions with people, animals, and AI. When we take the intentional stance, we don't necessarily believe that the other entity consciously has thoughts or intentions in the same way that we do. Rather, we use the attribution of intentions as a useful heuristic to interpret behavior in a way that helps us predict outcomes and interact more effectively. With people, the intentional stance allows us to foster better communication and social understanding. By considering that others act based on their beliefs and desires, we can avoid jumping to conclusions about their motives and instead seek to understand the deeper reasons behind their actions. For example, when a friend is late to a meeting, instead of assuming they are inconsiderate, we might interpret their lateness as due to an unspoken intention, like being caught in traffic or dealing with an unexpected situation. With animals, applying the intentional stance to animals enriches our relationships with them. Rather than treating animals as mere reflexive machines, this stance encourages empathy and understanding. For instance, when a cat rubs up against us, we could interpret this behavior as the cat's intention to solicit attention or affection. Understanding this behavior as goal-directed enriches our interactions and encourages a more compassionate approach to animal welfare. With AI, as machines and AI systems become more advanced, adopting the intentional stance is an effective way to interact with them. If an AI system is performing a task, viewing it as having goals, even if only metaphorically, allows us to anticipate its behavior and correct any missteps. For example, if a self-driving car suddenly changes lanes unexpectedly, interpreting this action as the car trying to avoid an obstacle can help us understand and trust its decisions, even when we don't fully comprehend the underlying algorithms. Real-life applications: how to use the intentional stance in personal and professional life. By consciously applying the intentional stance in our day-to-day life, we can improve our understanding and relationships with others. This approach encourages patience, empathy, and better communication, making it easier to navigate complex social dynamics. In personal relationships, imagine a situation where you have a disagreement with a friend. If you take the intentional stance, you might ask yourself, what are their beliefs and desires that are leading them to act this way? This can shift the focus from defensiveness to curiosity, creating space for deeper conversations and conflict resolution. Instead of assuming that your friend is being stubborn or unreasonable, you may discover that their behavior stems from a legitimate concern or a difference in priorities. In the workplace, the intentional stance can also be applied in the workplace to foster collaboration and understanding. If a colleague appears to be hoarding information or avoiding sharing resources, instead of assuming malice or selfishness, consider what their intentions might be. Are they motivated by fear of failure or insecurity about their own position? By understanding the underlying intentions, you can address the root cause of their actions and work toward a solution that benefits everyone. In customer service and conflict resolution, customer service is another area where the intentional stance can transform interactions. When a customer is upset, attributing their frustration to a need for acknowledgement or a desire for fairness can guide how you approach the conversation. Instead of viewing them as an adversary, you begin to see them as someone whose actions are driven by understandable beliefs and emotions. This mindset helps defuse tension and paves the way for constructive dialogue. Empathy and understanding: how the intentional stance increases compassion. The intentional stance does more than just enhance our ability to predict behavior, it increases our empathy. When we consider others' actions as goal-directed, we are more likely to approach them with kindness and understanding rather than judgment. This shift in mindset helps us see people, and even machines, not as obstacles or inconveniences, but as entities with goals, desires, and motivations that deserve to be understood. For example, consider the case of a customer service representative dealing with an irate customer. By adopting the intentional stance, the representative might interpret the customer's anger as a reflection of unmet needs or a fear of being treated unfairly. This empathetic approach encourages patience and can lead to a more positive resolution, as the representative seeks to understand and address the root cause of the customer's frustration. Similarly, in personal relationships, adopting the intentional stance allows us to better understand the emotions and motivations behind the actions of those we care about. This deeper understanding fosters trust and connection, making it easier to navigate challenges and disagreements with compassion. Case studies and examples: successes in problem-solving and relationship management through the intentional stance. To see the power of the intentional stance in action, we can look at real-world scenarios where adopting this perspective led to positive outcomes. Workplace collaboration: imagine a team working on a project where one member is consistently late in submitting their portion of the work. Instead of jumping to the conclusion that this person is lazy or unmotivated, adopting the intentional stance might reveal that the person is struggling with time management or feels overwhelmed by their workload. By recognizing these underlying intentions, the team can offer support or redistribute tasks, leading to a more efficient and harmonious collaboration. Parenting. A parent dealing with a child's tantrum might initially interpret the behavior as pure defiance. However, applying the intentional stance could lead the parent to understand that the child is acting out because they feel powerless or frustrated by a situation beyond their control. This understanding can guide the parent in providing comfort and addressing the root cause of the child's distress, rather than simply punishing the behavior. AI and robotics. In the world of robotics, Dennett's intentional stance has been applied to improve interactions between humans and machines. For example, if a robot is malfunctioning in a factory, rather than simply seeing it as a broken machine, technicians might interpret its actions as attempts to fulfill its goal, like sorting items. This perspective leads to a more effective troubleshooting process, where the human operator can better understand the machine's behavior and correct any errors in its programming. By applying the intentional stance in our personal, professional, and even technological interactions, we become better equipped to understand others, predict behavior, and respond with empathy. Dennett's idea challenges us to move beyond simplistic interpretations of behavior and embrace a more thoughtful, compassionate approach to the world around us. 2. Free will as an evolving concept, understanding choice in a deterministic universe. Unpacking Dennett's theory of free will, moving beyond classical notions of autonomy. One of Daniel Dennett's most thought-provoking ideas is his theory of free will, which he views not as a simple, all-or-nothing concept but as a product of evolutionary biology and cognitive development. In his view, free will isn't about escaping the laws of nature or having absolute control over every aspect of our lives. Instead, Dennett suggests that free will is the ability to make decisions that reflect our goals, values, and reasoning, even within a universe governed by natural laws. In traditional philosophical discussions, free will is often contrasted with determinism, the idea that every event, including human actions, is determined by preceding events and causes. Classical views of free will demand that for us to be truly free, our choices must not be predetermined by prior causes. This is the so-called libertarian conception of free will, where individuals are seen as capable of making uncaused choices. Dennett rejects this dichotomy. Instead, he advocates for a form of compatibilism, the idea that free will can coexist with determinism. He suggests that while our actions are influenced by a combination of our biology, environment, and past experiences, we still have the capacity for choice within those constraints. Free will, for Dennett, is not the ability to act without cause but the ability to make choices in complex, evolving contexts. Free will in the context of neuroscience, how the brain shapes our choices. Dennett's approach to free will is deeply informed by neuroscience. Rather than viewing the brain as a ghost in the machine, or as a vessel for an immaterial soul, Dennett sees the brain as an incredibly sophisticated organ shaped by evolution, which enables us to process information, evaluate choices, and respond to our environment. He argues that the brain's complex architecture provides us with the capacity to generate different courses of action based on our values, desires, and reasoning abilities. This concept is in stark contrast to earlier, more dualistic ideas, such as those proposed by René Descartes, who argued that the mind and body are separate entities. Dennett believes that the brain is entirely physical, and that our sense of free will emerges from the brain's ability to process information and predict future outcomes. In this framework, free will is not the ability to act in an entirely uncaused manner, but the capacity to act within a system that takes into account a multitude of variables. The brain's prefrontal cortex, for example, allows us to consider the consequences of our actions, weigh different options, and act on them in a way that reflects our goals. While these decisions may be influenced by a complex web of genetic, environmental, and cultural factors, we are still able to make choices within those parameters. The compatibility of free will with determinism, understanding Dennett's view on compatibilism. The central challenge to traditional notions of free will lies in the debate between determinism and human agency. If the universe operates according to the laws of physics, and if every event has a cause, then how can we be said to have free will? Dennett's response is that the apparent conflict between determinism and free will arises from misunderstandings about what free will really entails. Rather than viewing free will as the ability to make completely random or unpredictable choices, Dennett defines it as the ability to make informed, reasoned decisions within a given set of constraints. He calls this evolutionary free will, suggesting that our freedom arises from our evolved capacity to engage in complex, goal-directed behavior. In Dennett's view, we don't need to be entirely uncaused in our choices to have free will. What matters is that we have evolved cognitive tools, such as self-awareness, the ability to reflect on our actions, and the capacity to plan for the future, that allow us to make decisions that are meaningfully our own. These decisions are the product of a complex interplay of genetics, environment, and conscious reasoning. Thus, Dennett's compatibilism allows for a middle ground where free will exists in a deterministic world. The key is that our ability to make decisions based on our own reasoning and values is what constitutes our freedom, not the ability to act without any cause or influence. Real-life implications: how this understanding alters our perception of responsibility. One of the most profound implications of Dennett's theory of free will is how it changes our understanding of moral responsibility. If free will isn't about absolute freedom from causality but rather the capacity to act in accordance with one's goals and reasoning, then we can still hold individuals accountable for their actions, even though those actions may be influenced by prior causes. For example, imagine a person who commits a crime. Under Dennett's framework, the individual is still morally responsible for their actions, but this responsibility is tied to their ability to reflect on the consequences of their actions and make decisions in line with their values. If someone commits a crime due to ignorance, poor reasoning, or an inability to control their impulses, we can acknowledge that their capacity for decision-making was compromised, but they are still responsible for acting within their cognitive and emotional limitations. This perspective also allows for a more nuanced approach to justice. Rather than viewing people as completely free agents who should be punished for their misdeeds without considering context, we can develop more empathetic systems of accountability that take into account an individual's mental state, environmental influences, and cognitive limitations. This doesn't mean that we forego punishment or justice, but it encourages us to consider the underlying causes of behavior and seek solutions that encourage rehabilitation and understanding. Practical steps for exercising free will within life's constraints. Dennett's model of free will presents an empowering view of human agency. We may not be entirely free from the influences of biology, culture, or environment, but we are still able to make meaningful decisions within those constraints. This understanding of free will emphasizes personal growth, responsibility, and the capacity for change. Here are some practical steps to exercise free will in your daily life. Engage in reflective thinking. By regularly reflecting on your actions and decisions, you become more aware of the factors that influence your behavior. This reflection helps you make decisions that align more closely with your true goals and values. Cultivate self-awareness. Develop an understanding of how your emotions, biases, and past experiences shape your decisions. By recognizing these influences, you can make more deliberate and informed choices. Practice goal setting. The ability to set and pursue meaningful goals is a crucial aspect of free will. By defining your long-term objectives, you empower yourself to take actions that align with your values, even when faced with external pressures or distractions. Embrace personal responsibility. Recognize that, while your choices may be shaped by external factors, you are still responsible for how you respond to them. Take ownership of your decisions and learn from both successes and failures. Learn from mistakes. Free will is not about making perfect choices every time, but about learning from your experiences and using that knowledge to make better decisions in the future. Embrace mistakes as opportunities for growth. Real-life examples of free will and determinism in action. To illustrate Dennett's view of free will in action, consider the example of someone who has been raised in an abusive household. This person's upbringing likely shaped their behaviors and reactions in significant ways, yet, within that context, they still have the capacity to make decisions that reflect their personal goals and values. They may choose to break the cycle of abuse and seek therapy, or they may choose to perpetuate patterns of behavior they learned growing up. In this case, free will isn't about escaping the influence of one's environment. It's about exercising the ability to choose one's actions within those constraints. This nuanced view of free will allows for a more compassionate understanding of human behavior, one that recognizes the complexities of individual decision-making while still affirming personal responsibility. With this understanding of Dennett's view on free will, we can see that free will is not a matter of escaping determinism but of making meaningful choices within the constraints of our environment, biology, and past experiences. This concept encourages us to take responsibility for our actions, while also recognizing the factors that shape them. 3. Questioning your beliefs. How to approach the world with critical thinking. The importance of critical thinking in Dennett's philosophy. At the heart of Daniel Dennett's philosophy is a commitment to critical thinking and intellectual honesty. He emphasizes the importance of questioning our beliefs, challenging assumptions, and remaining open to new evidence. This process is not just about debunking false ideas, but about developing a deeper, more nuanced understanding of the world. In Dennett's view, humans have a natural tendency to form beliefs based on limited information, biases, and inherited cultural norms. While this can serve adaptive purposes, it can also lead to false or poorly supported ideas. For Dennett, the key to intellectual growth is learning how to think critically, being aware of our cognitive biases, seeking out evidence, and being willing to revise our beliefs in light of new information. Critical thinking, in this context, is not merely a tool for skepticism or doubt but a means of refining and improving our worldview. It's about making the best use of our cognitive abilities to arrive at conclusions that are more accurate, rational, and reflective of reality. The role of skepticism. How doubt drives understanding. Dennett strongly advocates for a skeptical mindset, one that questions both our own beliefs and the beliefs of others. This form of skepticism is not about being dismissive or cynical but about fostering curiosity and intellectual humility. Dennett argues that doubt is a powerful engine for progress, as it forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge and consider alternative perspectives. For example, in the realm of science, skepticism leads to the continual testing of hypotheses, the gathering of data, and the refining of theories. It's this process of constant questioning that has allowed science to progress from ancient superstitions to our current understanding of the universe. Similarly, in philosophy, questioning the assumptions we hold about topics like morality, consciousness, and free will allows us to arrive at more refined and thoughtful answers. In everyday life, skepticism encourages us to question popular beliefs and unexamined traditions. Instead of accepting ideas passively, we ask, what evidence supports this belief? Could this be an oversimplification? Are there alternative explanations that are more plausible? By practicing skepticism, we not only improve our understanding of the world but also encourage a culture of intellectual honesty and inquiry. Cognitive biases, understanding the mental shortcuts that shape our beliefs. One of the key obstacles to critical thinking, according to Dennett, is cognitive bias, the mental shortcuts our brains take to process information quickly. While these biases can be helpful in everyday life, they often lead us to make irrational judgments or hold on to inaccurate beliefs. Some common cognitive biases include confirmation bias, the tendency to seek out information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs, while ignoring evidence that contradicts them. This bias can create echo chambers where we only hear information that aligns with our worldview, making it harder to change our beliefs. Anchoring bias, the tendency to rely too heavily on the first piece of information we encounter when making decisions. For example, if the first time we hear about a topic we are interested in is through a specific source, we may be unduly influenced by that source, even if later evidence contradicts it. Availability heuristic, the tendency to overestimate the importance of information that is readily available or memorable. For example, if we frequently hear about airplane crashes in the media, we might overestimate the risks of flying, even though the data shows that flying is statistically much safer than driving. Dennett argues that becoming aware of these biases is essential for developing critical thinking skills. By recognizing when we are succumbing to cognitive shortcuts, we can make a conscious effort to seek out diverse perspectives, weigh evidence more carefully, and avoid making snap judgments based on incomplete information. The role of empathy in questioning beliefs, understanding different perspectives. While skepticism is essential for intellectual growth, Dennett also underscores the importance of empathy in questioning beliefs. It's not enough to simply question our own assumptions, we must also strive to understand the beliefs of others. This is where empathy plays a key role in the process of intellectual exchange. Empathy, in this context, is not about agreeing with someone's beliefs or emotions but about genuinely trying to understand where they are coming from. Dennett encourages us to engage with differing viewpoints with an open mind, recognizing that others' beliefs are often deeply tied to their personal experiences, cultural backgrounds, and social contexts. For example, when encountering a person with a belief system that is vastly different from our own, whether in politics, religion, or philosophy, we can ask, what experiences led this person to hold this belief? What evidence or reasoning are they drawing from? What common ground can we find to understand each other better? This empathetic approach fosters productive dialogue, allowing us to engage with opposing views constructively rather than defensively. It also encourages us to refine our own beliefs by considering alternative viewpoints, making us more open-minded and less entrenched in our assumptions. The scientific method, a framework for rethinking beliefs. Dennett's commitment to questioning beliefs is deeply aligned with the scientific method, a systematic approach to gathering knowledge based on empirical evidence, experimentation, and critical analysis. The scientific method provides a structured framework for rethinking our beliefs by encouraging us to make observations, form hypotheses, test them, and revise our conclusions based on the results. In Dennett's view, the scientific method is not just a tool for understanding the natural world but also a powerful approach to evaluating beliefs about complex, subjective phenomena like consciousness, morality, and human behavior. By applying scientific principles to these areas, we can gain more accurate and reliable insights into the nature of reality. For example, in the field of psychology, scientific research has helped to challenge long-held beliefs about the nature of the human mind and behavior. Through experiments and empirical studies, psychologists have debunked various myths about intelligence, mental illness, and human motivation, replacing them with evidence-based models that are more nuanced and accurate. Dennett also applies the scientific method to the study of consciousness and the mind. Rather than treating consciousness as a mysterious or unexplainable phenomenon, he advocates for studying it through the lens of neuroscience and evolutionary theory. By questioning traditional beliefs about consciousness and using scientific evidence to shape our understanding, we can make significant strides in uncovering the mechanisms behind our subjective experiences. How to encourage critical thinking in daily life. To apply Dennett's approach to questioning beliefs in everyday life, consider the following strategies. Ask questions regularly. Practice curiosity by asking questions about the world around you. When you encounter new information, challenge yourself to dig deeper and understand the underlying reasons behind it. For example, if you read a news article, ask, what is the source of this information? What other perspectives might exist? Is this argument supported by data? Seek out diverse sources. In a world filled with polarized views and echo chambers, it's essential to expose yourself to diverse perspectives. Read books, articles, and studies from a variety of sources, especially those that challenge your current beliefs. Engaging with differing viewpoints will help you broaden your understanding and refine your own positions. Practice humility and flexibility. Be willing to admit when you're wrong or when you don't have all the answers. Intellectual humility allows you to remain open to new evidence and perspectives. When you encounter compelling evidence that contradicts your beliefs, be open to adjusting your position. Engage in thoughtful dialogue. Engage in discussions with others who hold different beliefs. Rather than trying to win an argument, approach these conversations as opportunities for mutual learning. Be curious about others' reasoning and ask them to explain their beliefs in detail. Case studies of critical thinking in action. To illustrate the power of questioning beliefs, consider the following examples. Scientific revolutions. Throughout history, great scientific advancements have come from challenging deeply held beliefs. For example, the theory of heliocentrism, proposed by Copernicus and later championed by Galileo, overturned the long-standing belief that the Earth was the center of the universe. This shift in thinking fundamentally changed our understanding of the cosmos and paved the way for modern astronomy. Social progress. In the realm of social justice, critical thinking has been crucial in questioning discriminatory beliefs and practices. The abolition of slavery, the fight for women's rights, and the movement for LGBTQ+ equality all involve challenging deeply entrenched societal beliefs. Activists and thinkers questioned the moral assumptions behind these practices and used critical reasoning to argue for a more just and equitable society. Personal growth. On an individual level, questioning our own beliefs can lead to profound personal growth. For example, someone who grows up with strong political or religious views might eventually question those beliefs after encountering new evidence or engaging with different viewpoints. This process of self-reflection can lead to greater intellectual freedom and a more thoughtful, open-minded approach to life. By adopting Dennett's approach to questioning beliefs, we not only develop sharper critical thinking skills but also foster a deeper, more empathetic understanding of the world. This process helps us grow intellectually, refine our views, and navigate a complex, ever-changing world with greater wisdom and understanding. 4. The evolution of consciousness, understanding the mind's complexity. Consciousness as a product of evolution, how the mind evolved over time. For Daniel Dennett, consciousness is not a mystical or inexplicable phenomenon but a product of evolutionary processes. He views consciousness as a complex, emergent property that arose over time through natural selection. According to Dennett, the mind and consciousness are deeply tied to the brain's evolution, which allowed humans to navigate their environment with increasing sophistication. Dennett rejects the idea that consciousness is a single thing that can be easily defined. Instead, he proposes that it's a collection of cognitive abilities and processes that work together to create our experience of awareness. Just as the human brain evolved to solve complex problems related to survival, such as recognizing threats, planning for the future, and forming social bonds, so too did consciousness evolve as a tool for processing and responding to the world. In this view, consciousness is not something magical or separate from the body, but a function of our biology. Dennett suggests that the brain is a highly adaptive, complex organ that has evolved to process information in ways that enhance survival and reproduction. As humans became more complex in their social interactions, environmental challenges, and cognitive capacities, consciousness emerged as an adaptive trait that enabled them to make sense of the world, communicate, and plan actions in a coordinated way. The multiple drafts model of consciousness, rewriting the story of the mind. One of Dennett's key contributions to the study of consciousness is his multiple drafts model, which provides a novel perspective on how consciousness works. According to this model, consciousness is not a single, unified experience that we can directly access. Instead, it consists of various mental processes that are continually being written or drafted by the brain as it interacts with the environment. Rather than having one central theater in the brain where consciousness occurs, Dennett suggests that multiple cognitive processes occur simultaneously, and each of these processes contributes to our ongoing awareness. These drafts of experience are continuously updated and revised, much like a writer revising a manuscript. As we engage with the world, our brain constructs narratives, interprets sensory data, and processes information to create our perception of reality. This process is dynamic and always evolving, which is why our conscious experience can change in an instant. The multiple drafts model challenges the traditional view of consciousness as a passive receiver of information or a mirror of the external world. Instead, it presents consciousness as an active process of interpretation, one that is constantly revising and updating our understanding of what is happening around us. The role of the self in consciousness, how self-reflection emerged. A critical aspect of Dennett's theory of consciousness is the role of the self in shaping our experience. According to Dennett, consciousness is closely tied to our ability to reflect on ourselves, to engage in metacognition, thinking about thinking, and to have a sense of selfhood. However, he argues that the self is not a fixed, immutable entity, but rather a dynamic and evolving construct. From an evolutionary standpoint, the development of self-reflection likely provided a survival advantage. By being able to reflect on our actions, anticipate future outcomes, and learn from past experiences, early humans were able to make better decisions and adapt to changing environments. This self-reflection enabled individuals to form more complex social relationships, plan for the future, and navigate the complexities of their surroundings. Dennett suggests that the sense of self is not a simple, unified experience but a narrative that we construct about our own lives. The brain constantly creates stories about who we are, where we've been, and where we're going. These stories are influenced by our experiences, memories, and social interactions, but they are not fixed, they can be revised and rewritten over time. Consciousness and the brain, how neurology and psychology shape our awareness. Dennett's exploration of consciousness is deeply informed by neuroscience and psychology. He emphasizes that consciousness is a product of brain activity and that our subjective experiences are directly tied to the functioning of neural networks. In his view, the brain is not a passive organ but an active processor of information that generates our conscious experience. One of the most important findings in neuroscience, according to Dennett, is that consciousness is not localized to a single region of the brain. Instead, it emerges from the interactions of multiple brain areas, each responsible for different aspects of perception, memory, emotion, and decision-making. These regions work together to create a unified experience of awareness, though this experience is not centralized in any one part of the brain. For example, when we experience pain, it is not just the sensory processing areas of the brain that are active, it's also the areas that process emotions, memories, and context. The brain integrates all of this information to create a holistic experience of pain, which includes not only the sensation but also the emotional and cognitive responses to it. Dennett's approach to consciousness suggests that by studying the brain's neural mechanisms, we can better understand the processes that give rise to awareness and subjective experience. Neuroscience, in this view, doesn't just explain how the brain works, it provides insights into how consciousness itself emerges. Consciousness as a social phenomenon, the role of interaction in developing awareness. Dennett also acknowledges that consciousness is not just an individual phenomenon but a social one. As humans evolved, their consciousness became increasingly shaped by social interactions. Early humans likely relied on group cohesion and communication to survive, and this social environment played a significant role in the development of their cognitive abilities. According to Dennett, our ability to share thoughts, emotions, and experiences with others is a crucial aspect of consciousness. Language, in particular, is a key tool that allows us to communicate complex ideas, express our emotions, and make sense of the world. Through language and social interaction, humans create shared narratives that shape their individual and collective identities. In this view, consciousness is not just about internal reflection but also about engaging with the social world. Our awareness of ourselves is deeply intertwined with our awareness of others. This social dimension of consciousness is what allows humans to form relationships, cooperate in groups, and develop cultural norms. Dennett's theory of consciousness, then, is not just a cognitive or neurological issue, it's also a deeply social one. By understanding how social interactions contribute to consciousness, we gain a richer understanding of the human mind and the ways in which it evolves in response to both biological and cultural factors. Consciousness and the problem of qualia, addressing the hard problem. One of the most famous challenges in the philosophy of mind is the hard problem of consciousness, why and how subjective experiences, or qualia, arise from physical processes in the brain. Qualia refer to the individual, subjective qualities of experience, such as the redness of a rose or the pain of a headache, that seem inherently private and difficult to explain in physical terms. Dennett addresses this issue by arguing that qualia, while difficult to describe or measure, are ultimately reducible to brain processes. He suggests that our conscious experiences are the result of complex neural activity, and while these experiences may seem ineffable, they can be explained through the interactions of sensory systems, memory, and cognitive processing. In Dennett's view, the hard problem of consciousness is not about explaining the existence of qualia, but about understanding how the brain produces these experiences and how we can conceptualize them within a scientific framework. He argues that once we understand the neural mechanisms behind consciousness, the so-called hard problem will become easier to address, as we will see that subjective experience is simply a product of the brain's processing power. The implications of consciousness for free will and moral responsibility. Dennett's theory of consciousness has important implications for our understanding of free will and moral responsibility. Since consciousness is an emergent property of the brain, it suggests that our awareness and decision-making abilities are the result of complex neural processes that have evolved over time. For Dennett, this doesn't negate moral responsibility, it reinforces it. While our decisions may be influenced by genetic predispositions, environmental factors, and past experiences, we still have the capacity to make reasoned choices within the framework of our evolved consciousness. The fact that we are conscious beings allows us to reflect on our actions, understand their consequences, and adjust our behavior accordingly. This view challenges traditional notions of moral responsibility that rely on an assumption of complete autonomy and control. Instead, Dennett's approach emphasizes that while we may not be entirely free in a metaphysical sense, we are still capable of making decisions that align with our values and reflect our understanding of the world. This capacity for reflective self-regulation is what allows us to be held accountable for our actions. Practical implications: cultivating self-awareness and understanding the mind. Dennett's exploration of consciousness encourages us to cultivate self-awareness and engage in practices that help us better understand our minds. By recognizing the complex, emergent nature of consciousness, we can develop a deeper appreciation for our ability to reflect on our experiences and make thoughtful decisions. Here are some practical steps to apply Dennett's ideas in daily life. Engage in mindfulness. Practicing mindfulness helps you become more aware of your thoughts, emotions, and sensory experiences. This can deepen your understanding of how consciousness works and help you become more present in your daily life. Reflect on your thought processes. Regularly take time to reflect on how your mind interprets the world. Notice the ways in which your brain constructs narratives about your experiences, and consider how these narratives shape your understanding of reality. Study neuroscience and psychology. To gain a better understanding of the brain's role in consciousness, explore the fields of neuroscience and psychology. Learning about how the brain processes information can provide valuable insights into the nature of your own conscious experience. Engage in meaningful social interactions. Since consciousness is deeply social, engaging in thoughtful, reflective conversations with others can help you develop a more nuanced understanding of your own beliefs and experiences. By viewing consciousness as an evolutionary phenomenon, Dennett offers a compelling framework for understanding the mind's complexity. This perspective challenges us to rethink traditional ideas about the self, free will, and subjective experience, while providing a more scientifically grounded way of exploring consciousness in both philosophical and practical terms. 5. The ethics of consciousness, moral implications of understanding the mind. In addition to his contributions to the philosophy of mind, Dennett has also explored the profound ethical implications of our understanding of consciousness. His work challenges us to rethink the way we treat other beings, whether human or non-human, based on how we view consciousness. Dennett's perspective on ethics is rooted in a naturalistic, scientific approach to understanding human beings as complex, conscious organisms. He argues that our increasing understanding of consciousness has important consequences for how we think about moral responsibility, rights, and the treatment of others. Consciousness and the moral status of other beings. One of the most significant ethical questions raised by Dennett's theory of consciousness concerns the moral status of non-human animals. If consciousness is an emergent property of complex neural systems, then the question arises, to what extent do non-human animals share this consciousness, and how should that affect our treatment of them? Dennett believes that consciousness is not an all-or-nothing phenomenon. It exists on a spectrum, with different species possessing varying degrees of conscious awareness. While humans possess the highest levels of reflective self-awareness, other animals, particularly mammals and birds, exhibit forms of consciousness as well. Dennett argues that the more complex an animal's brain, the more likely it is to experience some form of conscious awareness, even if it is not as fully developed or self-reflective as human consciousness. This insight has profound ethical implications. If certain non-human animals are conscious beings capable of experiencing pain, pleasure, and other subjective states, then they deserve moral consideration. Just as humans are morally obligated to avoid causing unnecessary suffering to other humans, they must extend this moral consideration to animals as well. This does not necessarily mean treating all animals the same way as humans, but it does suggest that we should refrain from causing suffering to animals in ways that are not justified by legitimate human interests. Dennett's evolutionary view of consciousness challenges the traditional human-centered view of morality. Instead of assuming that animals exist solely for human use, Dennett's perspective suggests that animals are conscious beings whose interests should be respected. This encourages a more humane approach to issues like factory farming, animal experimentation, and habitat destruction. The ethics of free will, rethinking responsibility in light of consciousness. Dennett's theory of consciousness also has implications for how we think about free will and moral responsibility. Traditionally, moral philosophy has been concerned with questions of personal autonomy and individual responsibility. If we are conscious beings with the ability to make choices, then we are responsible for those choices. But Dennett's view of consciousness complicates this idea. Dennett argues that free will is not an absolute, metaphysical quality but rather an emergent property of a complex, conscious mind. He acknowledges that our decisions are influenced by a range of factors, genetic predispositions, environmental influences, social conditioning, and so on. However, he believes that this does not eliminate free will altogether. Instead, it suggests that free will is more nuanced than we typically imagine. It is not about being completely free from influence, but rather about having the capacity to reflect on those influences, evaluate different options, and make reasoned choices. This understanding of free will has important ethical implications. Dennett argues that we should hold people accountable for their actions, but with a more nuanced understanding of responsibility. Instead of assuming that people have complete, unimpeded control over their actions, we should recognize the role of factors like biology, upbringing, and culture in shaping behavior. At the same time, Dennett maintains that individuals still have the capacity for moral reasoning and self-control, which makes them responsible for their actions. This more complex view of free will can lead to more compassionate and effective approaches to justice. For example, instead of simply punishing wrongdoers, we might seek to understand the underlying causes of their behavior and offer rehabilitation and support. Dennett's perspective encourages a more rehabilitative, restorative approach to justice, one that recognizes the interplay between individual agency and external influences. The ethics of artificial intelligence, conscious machines, and moral responsibility. As our understanding of consciousness deepens, it also raises important ethical questions about artificial intelligence, AI. Dennett's ideas about the mind and consciousness have significant implications for how we think about the potential for machines to become conscious. If consciousness is an emergent property of complex neural processes, could it be replicated in an artificial system? And if so, what moral responsibilities would we have toward these conscious machines? Dennett is cautious but open-minded about the possibility of creating conscious machines. He suggests that if we were able to design machines with the same level of complexity as the human brain, they might, in theory, become conscious. However, he acknowledges that we are far from understanding the full mechanisms that give rise to consciousness, and creating a truly conscious machine may be a long way off. Nevertheless, Dennett's view of consciousness suggests that if we do eventually create machines with the capacity for subjective experience, we will need to consider their moral status. Just as we have moral obligations toward conscious animals, we would have similar obligations toward conscious machines. These obligations could include providing fair treatment, ensuring that they are not subjected to unnecessary harm, and granting them certain rights or protections. The ethical implications of conscious AI are profound. Dennett's work encourages us to think carefully about the kinds of machines we create, how we treat them, and what moral responsibilities we have toward them. As AI continues to advance, these questions will become more pressing, and Dennett's ideas will likely play a significant role in shaping the ethical discussions surrounding this issue. Consciousness and the human condition, what it means to be human. Dennett's work on consciousness also has important implications for how we view the human condition. If consciousness is a product of evolution, then it suggests that humans are not fundamentally different from other animals but are rather part of a continuum of life that has evolved over millions of years. This view challenges traditional human exceptionalism, which holds that humans are uniquely special in the grand scheme of the universe. For Dennett, consciousness is a remarkable but natural outcome of evolutionary processes. While humans may possess unique cognitive abilities, such as complex language, advanced reasoning, and self-reflection, these abilities did not emerge out of nothing. They are the result of a long process of evolutionary development, and humans share many of the same basic cognitive structures with other animals. This view encourages humility and a deeper sense of connection with the rest of the animal kingdom. At the same time, Dennett's work invites us to appreciate the remarkable capacities of the human mind. While consciousness may not be unique to humans, our ability to reflect on our experiences, understand our place in the world, and contemplate the future gives us a profound sense of meaning and purpose. Consciousness, in Dennett's view, is what allows us to engage with the world in meaningful ways, to form relationships, and to create culture. It is what makes us capable of asking the big questions about life, morality, and the universe. This view of consciousness also has implications for how we approach death. If consciousness is an emergent property of the brain, then it is intimately tied to the biological processes that sustain life. Dennett's perspective on consciousness suggests that when the brain ceases to function, consciousness ends as well. While this view may be unsettling for some, it also encourages us to focus on making the most of our time in this life, appreciating the fleeting but extraordinary nature of conscious experience. Practical implications: applying ethics of consciousness in everyday life. Understanding the ethical implications of consciousness can have a profound impact on how we live our lives and interact with others. Here are some ways to apply Dennett's ideas about consciousness in everyday life. Practice compassion. Recognizing that other animals and beings may share varying degrees of consciousness encourages us to treat them with more compassion and respect. Avoid causing unnecessary suffering and strive to make ethical choices in how we interact with animals and the environment. Reconsider moral responsibility. In understanding that free will is not absolute, we can develop more empathy for others and offer support rather than judgment. Instead of focusing solely on punishment, we can approach issues like criminal behavior with a focus on rehabilitation and understanding. Reflect on AI ethics. As artificial intelligence continues to advance, it's essential to consider the ethical implications of creating conscious machines. Engage in discussions about the rights and responsibilities we may have toward intelligent systems and how to ensure they are treated fairly. Embrace our shared humanity. Recognize that our consciousness is not a divine or supernatural gift but a product of evolution. This understanding encourages humility and a sense of shared connection with all living beings, as well as a greater appreciation for the preciousness of conscious experience. Through his work, Dennett challenges us to expand our moral considerations beyond traditional boundaries. By understanding consciousness as a complex, evolutionary phenomenon, we can develop a more ethical approach to how we treat animals, other humans, and even machines. Dennett's insights encourage us to rethink our responsibilities in light of the profound nature of consciousness and to adopt a more compassionate, nuanced approach to moral issues. Conclusion. In his exploration of consciousness, Daniel Dennett offers a rich, scientifically grounded view that challenges traditional ethical frameworks and encourages us to reconsider our moral responsibilities toward animals, other humans, and even machines. His evolutionary approach to consciousness highlights its emergent, non-binary nature, prompting a shift in how we think about moral status and free will. By expanding the moral circle to include animals with varying degrees of consciousness, Dennett calls for a more compassionate approach to treatment and justice. His insights into free will suggest a more nuanced understanding of moral responsibility, one that takes into account the influences on behavior while still recognizing the capacity for reflection and reasoned decision-making. Dennett's theories also point to the potential ethical challenges posed by artificial intelligence. As machines become more complex, the possibility of conscious AI presents new moral questions about autonomy, rights, and ethical treatment. His naturalistic view of consciousness also prompts a humbling rethinking of human exceptionalism, placing us in the broader context of the natural world. In understanding that consciousness is an emergent product of evolutionary processes, we are invited to reflect on its precious and transient nature. Ultimately, Dennett's work on consciousness encourages us to approach ethics with a more compassionate, nuanced perspective. By considering the consciousness of other beings and the broader implications of our actions, we can work toward a more humane and just world, one that recognizes the value of all conscious entities, human and non-human alike. This perspective also challenges us to embrace our shared humanity, understanding that while our consciousness may be extraordinary, it is also a deeply interconnected phenomenon that binds us to the rest of the living world.